We will begin. This meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be shown on local access television and on the internet. If you would please stand and join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First, we have the conservation agent, John Delano, here to discuss MS4. So, John, take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. If I could bring this chair up, I've got use my Chromebook here to give me a little assistance. The objective of this presentation is to give the board an idea of what an MS4 is, what the general permit is, what is expected from the town, and give you some things to think about, and hopefully you'll invite me back to clarify a few things as you have a chance to digest what we're discussing tonight. So I don't plan to go in real depth on this for you tonight so that you have a chance to look at the handouts that I had given to Lorna to provide you, which kind of mimics what's on the presentation. So the federal government, under the Clean Waters Act, allows towns and cities in the United States to discharge their stormwater runoff into the waters of the federal government, which includes wetlands, rivers, streams, and even the ocean. So we, in order to be allowed to discharge into those as a town in Massachusetts, they issued a general stormwater permit to all the towns, and that was in 2003. So they updated it recently, and as of 2017, July 1st, they issued the permit, but Massachusetts was able to be part of a group that had a stay on that order, and they issued the Massachusetts one July 1st, 2018. And now we're into the permit as long as we meet their conditions. And so when you see on these slides something about the requirements, it's like an order of conditions. So you can make the change. Oh, and also an MS4 is your municipal stormwater system. So they call it an MS4. So the 6 minimum control measures that they require us to abide by as part of the permit is to do public education outreach. And there's 4 audiences: residents, industry, commercial, and construction, which would be developers. And we have to be able to provide them 2 messages for each one of those groups during the 5-year permit life. That's a pretty easy task, so that's not very daunting, and we should be able to handle that. And to be honest with you, this presentation this evening is a public outreach and will be counted towards our annual report that's due next May. Public participation's the next minimum, and it says control measure, but it's really an order or a conditional requirement of the permit. And annually, we need to provide the public an opportunity to discuss and participate in the implementation of our stormwater management program, which we're going to be obligated to provide the EPA. Next. The third minimum control measure or requirement is to find and eliminate sources of non-stormwater discharges into the storm system. They call it a storm sewer system, but it's really just the storm drainage system. We have to be proactive rather than reactive. I know of a town that responded whenever they found out from some agency that there was some septic systems flowing into the drain system. primarily the EPA and the DEP were doing testing of tributaries to the Salisbury Plain River. And in this town, it's called the Matfield River, I believe. And yes, it is. And so they were testing different sections of the river and discovered septic systems coming into their tributary to the river, and went upstream into East Bridgewater and found where sewer systems were being dumped into the drain system. They explained to the town, you have to eliminate this, and the town did it. And then when they were audited, the town said, see, we responded. And the EPA said, well, you only responded because we told you. It was up to you in order to abide by this requirement to be proactive and not reactive. And so they gave them a demerit, let's call it, for not abiding by the permit. They're very, very concerned about the towns being proactive. That means we have to go out on a systematic way and check the systems to see if there's discharges going into the drain system. And the last thing on that, number 3, includes the development of a system-wide storm sewer system map. We do have a mapping system for the town. It's after filing the notice of intent with the EPA, I discovered we're about 80% complete, and that means we're going to have to go out and find where the other 20% is, where they go and where they discharge. Where they go, I mean, between structures, and then where they actually discharge to the wetlands. Next. The 4th minimum control measure is a management of construction site runoff. They require an ordinance, another name for a bylaw or regulation. We've done this. Back in September of 2016, I put before the town meeting on behalf of the Conservation Commission a ordinance or a bylaw to control construction site runoff, and that did pass and was approved by the Attorney General in September. So now what we have to do is go in and be able to implement it, go out and do inspections, to have a program where it's systematic and consistent from one site to the next, and then be able to document it in case we ever are audited by the EPA, and then we can also include that as part of our annual report. Next. Management of post-construction site runoff. Same thing, that bylaw included both pre and post requirements, and so we're in good shape there, except we have to implement it. We just can't have it on the books. We have to actually be out there doing the inspections and making sure they're complying. One of the things about the post-construction is that quite often when a project is all constructed and complete, they've received their certificates of compliance from either the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, or whatever agency that approved them in the town. They feel that they don't have to do anything more. And so if they're promising as part of the permit to be able to construct their development, that they're going to be maintaining their drain system forever, no one had the ability to go out and make sure that they were doing that. So there are commercial sites in town that made all those promises, and some of those promises included reports back to the town, and we haven't seen one yet. So the new bylaws and regulations are going to make sure that we get those, because EPA wanted some enforcement ability to be able to, rather than just telling them they have to do it, that we tell them to do it, and then if they don't do it, we can enforce it. Now, it's generally going to be a learning process, so no one goes out and finds people right away if they haven't done it, but we have to educate them, let them know what they now need to do, and we try to get them to comply. And as you can see, some of the underlying items there, it's requiring us to encourage low-impact design and using green infrastructure. So instead of putting everything in a pipe and burying it in the ground, they want what they call bioretention basins, grass swales, those kind of things that allow extra treatment of the discharges that are coming off of parking lots in the streets. And they tend to treat the stormwater better than just a concrete pipe delivering a fast stream of water to the wetlands or the rivers. So we will have to have the various agencies that permit in this town start thinking towards the green infrastructure concept and the low-impact designs. Low-impact design would be, rather than having the whole parking lot blacktop, there would be green spaces where water can flow into and infiltrate in between the rows of parked cars. Rather than bumper to bumper, there would be a space with some green infrastructure built in to treat the water. Next. Good housekeeping in the municipal operations of the town. That's your DPW sites, your school parking lots, your transfer stations, anything that's a municipal operation needs to have a good housekeeping maintenance program and needs to show where the inspections are being made by the personnel for the town. So it could be school department people, it could be the DPW people, it could be the conservation agent, it could be the Board of Health agent. So they are putting a heavy emphasis on this number 6 as requiring the town to make sure they stay clean if they're going to make the other people, the developers, the industry, the commercial people be clean. They want the town to be clean as well. Next. So I gave you also a list of, and I can make it available to anyone in the public who's interested, the first year requirements for this permit. The first one said that we had to, within 90 days after the permit was issued, file a notice of intent with the EPA on how we were going to accomplish these 6 minimum control measures, or, as I mentioned before, orders of conditions or permit requirements. And we got that filed successfully. We're still waiting for any comments that they might have had on it. I check it daily to make sure that that I'm keeping on top of it to see if there's anything that we need to do. So far, so good. Just a comment about that. I discussed it with the town administrator and said that we're going to have to do this, and a lot of the towns that I work with outside of West Bridgewater were hiring consultants to draw it up. They were hiring consultants because there's a lot of technical aspect to the notice of intent that was filed, and I thought that we could save the town some money by not hiring an outside consultant, and with my background that I felt we could do it. It wasn't that I wasn't nervous about it, because this was a new thing, and it's new to everyone, and so the town administrator said, yeah, go for it. So we decided to handle it in-house, even though we were receiving proposals from engineering consultants outside that were working for other towns as well that were quite expensive. And as an example, one of the ones that works with this town quite often wanted $5,000 just to do an analysis of where we were at before they started writing the notice of intent. The same company was estimating for other towns to write the notice after they knew where the town stood with this analysis, $7,500. So that amount of money I couldn't see the town spending, so we accomplished it with not very much money at all. So after tooting the town's horn and my horn,
Thank you, John. That's great.
the number 2 item here is we need to prepare a townwide stormwater management program that's going to specifically say how we're going to accomplish our end of the bargain and get the other components of this, the residential, the commercial, the developers, to also be part of townwide stormwater management plan. So if you're going to dump water into our town streets, you have to manage your stormwater before it goes into the street.
David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but being 7:15, I have to ask you to open your public hearing.
Okay.
We're posted for that. So if you would like to open it, act on it, close it, and go back to the presentation, you can, or open it, complete the presentation, and then go back, your choice.
We'll open it, complete the presentation, and go back to it. So this is to transfer the Class 2 used car license from Vista Motors to Mega Motors. I'll read this was posted in the Enterprise, I'll read the posting.
I'll make a motion to open up the public hearing.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the posting pursuant to Chapter 140 of the Mass General Laws, a public hearing will be held on Wednesday, October 17, 2018 at 7:15 in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall, 65 North Main Street, West Bridgewater, on the transfer of a Class 2 used car dealer's license from Vista Motors LLC to Mega Motors Incorporated, to be located at 739 North Main Street, West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Interested parties are invited to be present and to be heard. And this was posted Thursday, September 27, 2018. And now we'll go back and finish up John's presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll speed this up then. After we write the stormwater management program plan, we need to also write an illicit discharge program and how we're going to detect and eliminate these unauthorized discharges into the storm system. Both these two things, I believe that we have in-house ability to do that. Some towns, as I mentioned on the notice of intent, are going to have the consultants write those, and I don't think it's necessary. One thing I want to say about the illicit discharge program is that it requires, as mentioned before, a proactive approach. So that means we have to go out and test the quality of the water getting into our catch basins. And if we find a polluted situation, we need to go and find where it's coming from. So you might need to do some dye testing, you might need to do some camera work. So there's a lot of work on this one, and it is getting close to Halloween, and this is a real scary one for me. I believe it's going to really take a big part of the labor effort and the costs for the town. Some of the other ones are not as expensive. We need to rank the stormwater outfalls that are likely to be polluting the water and tackle those first, and then the ones that are very unlikely to be polluting the water is on the lower end of that, but we have to cover them all. But we have to provide the EPA with our ranking by next year, by June 30th, 2019. We need to document sanitary overflows that were made to the system during the past 5 years. That's going to take some research with the Board of Health and with the DPW to see if they've discovered any of these in the past and have eliminated them, and we're going to have to tell the EPA on how that was done. Next, we need to have written procedures for doing inspections on construction sites. That's part of the construction site inspecting. I've got some draft documents set up where they would be inspection sheets and also the procedures. So that's not as scary. And the review of a plan to be permitted by an agency, whether it be the commission, the planning board, we need to have consistent procedures outlined so that everybody's on the same page, that the planning board has their rules and regulations and the statute to follow, and with the state subdivision control law statute to follow. And they also now have to keep in mind that we have the stormwater requirements, and those will have to be meshed in with the planning board's rules. So we have to talk to the planning board and any other group that does permitting. We need to implement a catch basin cleaning system, and I underlined the goal is that no basin be more than 50% full. I think a lot of times the town goes out and they do their catch basin cleaning, but it may be one street or a series of streets, and then the budget ends and that's it. There's no more cleaning for that year. The EPA is looking to have a goal that at least 50% townwide be, all catch basins be no more than 50% full townwide. All that has to be documented. Somebody has to keep track of this. Somebody has to have a log, a spreadsheet, whatever it's going to take to be able to prove to the EPA if we're audited that this is being done. So there's an organizational thing, a component to this. Sweep all streets, minimum once per year. Winter maintenance procedures, we need to have all those in place. And a lot of these things might be already in place, but they may be informal. They might be in someone's skill set that over the years they've developed this routine, but we now have to have it in writing. And then we have to inspect all stormwater treatment structures, and if they need some maintenance, they have to be upgraded. And that is all for the first year. I just threw in a couple of quick notes, very quick search, and found that January 2017, the Rhode Island Department of Transportation was fined $315,000 because in their consent order, it states that they failed to implement, they failed to develop, they failed to enforce, and a bunch of other things. But those are the basic components that the EPA is expecting us to do, is to implement and develop and enforce. The city of West Haven, Connecticut, in 2016 entered into a consent order that they had not done all those things, but that they would do it immediately. And so all of a sudden they went from not doing anything to now being forced in order to prevent them from being fined. And then the other item is the city of Rockford, Illinois. They were fined $329,395 for the same thing that the Rhode Island DOT was fined, that they failed to implement, develop, and enforce. So as the EPA gets into New England, and I know Rhode Island's part of New England, but they're going to be into New England states enforcing the newest permit, and we have to think about where we go from here. So I'm suggesting that we schedule another presentation so that I can explain some more things to you, like costs and some more details about the program. Budget season starts January, and we're probably going to be thinking about budgets in December. And so we got to start thinking towards how this is going to be for the next fiscal year. And then we need to decide who's going to manage this. Are we going to have outside consultants? Are we going to hire an individual to oversee this, and with the technical points that are required for it? That's not a very cheap salary that a person who's going to manage this program would want. So I would advocate that try to keep it in-house as much as possible by adjusting the scope of work required by people in town. And what I mean by that is, if we have someone in town that knows the departments, we can use some of the efficiencies of having a crew go out and clean a catch basin on a certain street, and in the same time, maybe they realize it's not mapped on our overall stormwater map. And with the technologies that we have, and sometimes just as simple as your phone, you can figure out the coordinates of where that catch basin is located. We get that onto our map, and now we're completing the requirement of updating our mapping system. Instead of having a person just go out and do that all day long and have to pay that person to do it, we're now utilizing personnel within the town without spending additional monies. But you'd need somebody to be thinking on how this is going to be done and managing it and getting it accomplished. So that, I believe, is it. The next one says, thank you for allowing me to give you a presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or I'd love to come back and explain a few things at a future meeting.
Yeah, John, I want to thank you for taking this assignment because it's quite a thing. And one of the things is, of course, the federal government, even the state government, are mandating all these things for us to do. Is there any funds available that we could apply for or anything else? I know we're asking you to do an awful lot of work, and you certainly do enough now. Is there any funds you know of that we could apply for?
There is the possibility of that, but I think it's very unlikely. And to back that up, the EPA put out a workshop notice that we want to be able to take people in your town that are involved with stormwater and have them come to a series of workshops that will educate them on how this could be funded internally in the town by developing a stormwater utility, or basically have a dedicated fund that's generated through permitting fees and other means. And the town administrator encouraged two of us from this town to go, and we went through that. And so we have some ideas, and in the regulation and the bylaw that I helped put together for that town meeting, we did have a place in there for a stormwater utility. There's nothing stated on what that is going to entail, but it's there, so it's already in place. All we need to do now is to develop a program that we feel is geared for West Bridgewater that would be satisfactory to the stakeholders. You and Finance Committee are big stakeholders, and be able to make it work so that it doesn't come out of the general budget. So yes, there are funds through that mechanism, but because the EPA put so much emphasis on this workshop, that tells me they are not coming up with money for us. They just want us to handle it ourselves. So it's unlikely.
Even if, what are we going to do, try to obey the law, because you always do, and but how about the streams out there that are going to either take this, whatever they direct us to do, and a lot of the streams out there, they haven't been cleaned for years. I mean, and even when we try to get something going, either through the mosquito control or something like that, they come up and do a little, but they're in bad shape. I mean, as I've been out with you on the field, and you know what I'm talking about. I mean, trees, limbs, everything else, and how. There's another thing, we need money to do all these things. I mean, we have our highway go out and we send them out, and like up on Grand Street when we went out to free that, we got the thing flowing again. But then again, you come back to the next year, and and people got to watch out there. They're along the streams, and they're throwing their leaves into the streams and everything else. But I'm just wondering, how's that going to work out?
So the grand scheme of things is that as you put the public outreach component of this permit out there, you're educating them not to throw the leaves, the lawn clippings, the debris into the streams that float down and get caught and clog it up and create flooding issues. So they're asking us to put that out in different forms, posters on the internet, webpage for the town, send flyers out with the school kids when they go home with something that's announcing some activity at school. Maybe we can include those types of things. So that's one way. The other is that we're promising them that we're going to be out maintaining our drain systems, and so we have to live up to that, which means that we have to be able to get coordination with the different departments to be able to get out there and do a little here, a little there, and not become a big draw on their resources, their labor resources, and tie them up when they have a lot of other things to do as well. But today, while you're on Grant Street, I need you to, and then you give them what their task is, in addition to what they're doing on other parts of Grant Street. So it's the idea of coordinating this and having a program that will keep everything efficient and try to keep the cost down. But there will be a cost. And I heard estimates being given by different people that attended these workshops that they're estimating based on the time requirements needed, between 100,000 and 200,000.
Yeah. But even the grass street, I mean, where, where the road, you go by, it's a little rainstorm we have. And the people that own the land, they build up the sides of the road. So you end up with a problem. Of course, that bridge the stones are all falling out. That's going to be an expensive thing. Eventually, that's going to have to be replaced.
Right?
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. Yep.
Quick question. Thank you. It was very thorough.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick questions. What other neighboring towns are working on this as well?
Every town
Every?
had to do it,
Okay.
and I've heard through the grapevine that there are a couple that didn't even bother filing it, and they'll be getting that consent order, I'm sure, from the EPA, because they're very serious about this, and they made that quite clear during these workshops. But East Bridgewater, I know, got theirs filed. West Bridgewater, I don't. This isn't, I'm not going to say because I don't know for sure, it was just hearsay, but I do know there's another, a surrounding town that failed to do it, at least two. And then Easton did, and they've already posted on the EPA's website that that's been accepted. And I think Easton got it in real early, and that's probably why. But almost all the other towns are listed without having theirs posted yet, so.
As you progress through the schedule and you start to maybe require some more expertise, or you're documenting some of this, might there be an opportunity for some shared services between West Bridgewater and another town that's at the same stage?
Yes, and
Okay.
we belong to the Southeast Stormwater Coalition. We being West Bridgewater and a lot of other surrounding towns, Easton, for example, Bridgewater, I think. And so there's this coalition that's put together to help, on a regional basis, share information, share expertise. And so, yes, your answer is yes, there is. And I think Sean, Chris, and I will be in Bridgewater at a coalition's workshop on what we're going to need to do to comply by June 30th of next year. So it's going to be very helpful to attend that. It's maybe somewhat of a rehash of what I gave you tonight of what's required for the first year, but I believe we might hear some other information that will be helpful, and so we're all going.
Now, as I was listening to him, thinking, okay, do we need to hire another full-time person or to maintain this, or is it a half a person job and sharing that person with another town? Is that possible, feasible, and would it be a cost saving in itself?
I believe you don't have to hire a new person to do it. I think it can be handled in-house. There would have to be budget considerations to put that responsibility on someone, and also maybe contractual changes to what we already have to allow for additional hours to be put in. But I think it can be done in-house, and I'm more than happy to take on that. I'm not saying you're obligated, but I'm just saying that I don't think it's necessary to go out. I think it can be done, just like I thought the notice of intent could be done by this town.
Well, I'm talking more about the people that have to go out there and check.
That's us.
Okay, okay.
So,
you think you're staffed and able to do that?
So the EPA is envisioning that it's a joint effort by all the different departments in town. So it's going to require, as part of the stormwater management plan, a training course for DPW workers, the water department workers possibly, if they allow it. And what I mean by they is the commissioners. And then the Board of Health. So now we get trained to go out and know how to inspect a catch basin to see that it's being polluted. And that is done in-house rather than hiring an engineering consultant to come in and do the test and send it off to a lab. So I believe it can be done. It's just a matter of you need someone in town who understands what's happening, what needs to be done. And it's scary, but it's also not impossible.
Thank you, John. We
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay, moving to the Class 2 license transfer. We have an application in front of us. I know there's a memo from Detective Canalupo with no concerns. Tracy, did you have anything, or is it all set?
It's all set from a paperwork perspective. Vista Motors has 2 locations. They are transferring the one located at 739 to Meta Motors. They are proposing hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., 7 days a week. There are restrictions, or there were restrictions on the Vista Motors license, and they would be ported over to this license as well. The applicant is here, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi.
My name is Leon Aluchinian. I'm working as a manager of used car dealership in Alnis. Now I'm working my own business, and that's why I applied for the.
Okay. Are there any questions, or is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the transfer of the Class 2 license.
Is there a
Okay,
second?
yeah, I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Welcome to town.
Congratulations. Thank you.
You know, Eldon, I'm looking at your sign, and I was, I started 2 years before.
You were a teenager before I started?
You became the
That was your grandson.
Three of the people selectmen. And it's in 79. Thank you.
We need a motion to close the hearing as well.
Oh, the landlord.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we can do the bylaw study committee next, since all that are coming are here. So there were 4 applications received, and David just let me know that one is unable to make it or withdrawing. Is that accurate, David?
I don't know. The email just came in, said he was unable to make it this evening. He didn't provide any reason or rationale. I did call him on a cell phone. I was unable to reach him. I left him a message about an hour prior to the meeting, and I've not heard back from him.
Okay, so I guess we can have the 3 that are here briefly introduce themselves, and just quickly state why they want to be on the bylaw study committee, or anything else they'd like to say. We'll go in order by the applications in front of us. Rick Kruger, you're up first.
Well, I've been an employee of the town for 38 years, been involved with the town government for probably over 40 years. I sat on the original bylaw study committee. It was formed years ago because I used to get up at town meeting and speak on proposed changes in the bylaws, because I don't like bylaws. Whenever a bylaw is passed, you're taking people's rights away and their property that they own. Bylaws are necessary, and because they do play a important part in developing a community, but you gotta be careful what you try to put on people. And some of the things that we saw in the original bylaw committee, we turned down, we didn't recommend, and they were for good reasons. And the committee was dissolved, I don't know why. I guess they didn't like the reviews we were given, some of the bylaws. But I'd like to be put back on it, because I have a strong feeling about some of them. I do research. When people come in, they'll give you, a story about a bylaw, but when you research what effect it's really going to have, sometimes it's a completely different story. So you know, I usually do my homework and look into it a little further. So, and I'm a homeowner in West Bridgewater. I own 3 properties in town. I'm a taxpayer. I think it's very important that people that sit on these committees, you know, have some stake in the town too. That they own property and that they're going to be affected by it. Not that they're going to put restrictions on people and then you know, they go home to another town. So I like to get back on it. I got a lot of experience in the town of West Bridgewater.
Great, thank you. Paula Bunker next.
My name is Paula Bunker, and I think I would be an asset to this committee for several reasons. One, I'm 4th generation in this town. I have a long-standing history with it with my family. They've all been farmers. We own a sizable amount of property over off the Copeland Street. So I think being on this committee, I bring a different perspective as to the farming community and what this town started out as, being the farming type community. As Rick was talking about, I do believe in less government and being intrusive into other people. So any bylaw that's presented, I think needs to be weighed very carefully. But I'm also not afraid to make hard decisions when some people aren't going to like it. I currently sit on the Board of Assessors, so I think my experience there can also help because these bylaws can impact people's property values. So that's something we have to keep in mind also as well. And I'm also on the Housing Authority just as of this year. So I have a different perspective also from dealing with some of our senior residents who used to own property and now no longer do. So I think that just adds a little bit extra to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And Steve Hobbs next.
Yeah, I think I explained it very clearly in these attachments that are here, and I hope you read them, because I'm not going to reiterate it again. So.
Okay, that's it?
Yeah, I've been on several committees in town, and you know, he knows, Eldon knows, and different people know. I've been very heavily involved with bylaw changes, petitions over the years with myself, Forrest Brome, and different residents, all right? We probably had 60 bylaws that we wanted to review in town, and like it says up there, we put some of them through, they got through, and it's always been an uphill struggle to do anything. So I think I can be an asset to it. I know the laws and stuff, and it could be help make it a success. That's it. You can
Okay.
read if you haven't even read the notes that
Of course I have.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion from the board. Is there anything?
So, yeah, I did have some questions. So it's a committee, and I think what I've heard is there's a feeling that some of the members aren't from this town. They're from other towns, and they're on the board. And that's not necessarily, or they're not viewed as a good thing in some people's view. So I'd like to know individually how you feel about that, and will you be able to work with that team?
Why do we have to have people from out of town review our bylaws? I don't understand that. I mean, there's enough people that want to put the time in that are from town, are taxpayers. These bylaws are going to affect them. Why do we need out of town people to, I mean, are these going to be town employees?
There are five department heads, David.
Okay, so what that does is it puts, they're under direct control of David, and so what he has, you know, if he's their boss, he can control what's going on and the bylaws, okay? And that's all I see this being about, control, okay? And I think that's why the first board was disbanded, that you guys got rid of it because you didn't like the reviews that you were getting. The selectmen brought in some bylaws that we just rejected. One of them was the selectmen were gonna fine people if they didn't mow their lawns, okay? And we didn't think that was right, because there's a lot of people, if there's a death in the family and the place is going through a probate or something, and they don't know who's gonna get the place, and they're having trouble mowing the lawn, the last thing they needed was fines, okay? And it doesn't happen all the time, but once in a while, in the course of somebody's life, they're gonna die and there's gonna be a problem. And I don't think that the town should be, and none of the board, all of us reviewing it, so we didn't think that was right. And the selectmen, it was proposed by one of the members of the selectmen, and they didn't like it. They wanted to get it through. And this is all I see, is that the Board of Selectmen now are gonna have control of the board. And I'd like to see a bylaw passed that you have to have people from town review the bylaws. It's gonna affect the people that live in town, not the people who work here, and not the people who go home to East Bridgewater, Whitman, or someplace else. It's gonna affect the people who live here, and they should have the say in it.
Okay, so the question was, and I think.
I'm against having anybody else reviewing our bylaws that work for the town, because they're the ones usually making the proposals.
So as of right now, you don't have a choice. If you're applying to be on this board, there are.
Well, I'll work with them, but I don't think that they're gonna be working in the best interest of the taxpayer. And I think that the taxpayers should stand up at town meeting, and we should pass a bylaw saying that there isn't gonna be any bylaw committee with out-of-towners on it.
Well, there's a process to do that, and it can always happen. But the point is, right now, we need a bylaw study committee that can.
Well, we had one.
Let me
Why
finish,
was it
please, Rick,
disbanded?
let me finish. I'm not gonna go back 5 years, okay? Everybody wants to talk about 2 years, 5 years ago. We need to go forward. We really need to, in this town, move forward. So, what I'm trying to get to is, right now, you have a committee of 5 department heads. David, could I have the 5 department heads?
Yep, I just want to clarify it. It's 2 department heads, which is the building inspector and the conservation agent, because they work with the bylaws every day. However, you have 3 residents as per their appointment on their board. So it is the chairman of the planning board, it is the chairman of the zoning board of appeals, and it's the chairperson of the finance committee.
Okay, so they bring a certain level of expertise in their area to this committee. And then we have 2 residents to be on the committee as well, with voting rights. So the objective is to get this started. If the townspeople want to put together a bylaw and try to have it passed at town meeting that eliminates having non-residents, then so be it, move forward with it. But right now, we need a bylaw study committee, and we need a bylaw study committee that can work
we have one.
together.
We have one.
We have one, and then now we're
We
in.
did. Why was it disbanded? Why did David?
David,
All right, we're getting
not
off
gonna go
topic.
back.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you have one
So-
person who answered your question. Did
Okay.
you want to ask the other 2 the same
Yes,
question?
I'd like to ask the other 2 the same question.
Do you want to repeat it in case they?
Sure. So the present committee is comprised with 5 department heads or committee chair people, and some are non-residents. Will you be able to work with them? What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on it, it was a bylaw that we were to review. And it was listed, and I believe it was discussed with the selectmen, that non-residents shouldn't be on committees, right? But it's something that I could work with, but I don't think it's right.
Paula?
As long as the people that aren't residents are working in the best interest of the town, it's fine. I mean, where they live, to me, right now is irrelevant, as long as they're doing what needs to be done and we all can work together for the benefit of the residents.
I also have one other thing. If you want to move forward with this, I would suggest, and we suggested this from the strategic plan, business planning, or whatever it was, committee, that you get a lawyer in here to train the committee on what are the rules on bylaws and how they are accepted. If town people submit signatures of a certain amount, they automatically go to a town meeting, regular town meeting. If they submit signatures with over 200 signatures, you have to react within so many days, even for the special town meeting. So I think in part in getting this committee going, you need a lawyer to explain the rules of it. Because what I also found during it is you discuss things with the selectmen. We present books of information, so the committee would have a better understanding. It goes down just with the bylaw, no information to the committee from the selectmen that there was 200 people who signed this thing. There were books made up with all kinds of information pertaining to these bylaws, so they could understand it before they made decisions.
I have no doubt there have been great tragedies in this town and atrocities with regards to boards and things that didn't happen and happened, but at some point, all that needs to say, okay, what's happened has happened, and now we need to move forward. This is a great opportunity to have a bylaw committee with some integrity and expertise brought into it. I'm not saying the past committee wasn't. I'm just saying here's an opportunity, and it's important to move forward with this.
Well,
You gotta educate the committee, that's my point, what I'm trying to say.
okay. Any questions or any other discussion?
I don't have any other questions.
Well, the only thing is here, I've been on the selectmen, I see the selectmen was mentioned. Well, there was things that were going on there that like, they're telling you, what windows you to have on your house. And, the board was very upset with some of those things. They were in there and they were moving forward. And really those were tough days, okay? And this is what I see as happening. So again, we have rules. State rules that we have to go by. You just saw the EPA here, rules that we got to go by. That committee has got to really look at these things before they bring them before. Some of the things that were coming in there, we just didn't make any sense. That's why there was problems. And as long as that goes on, there's going to be problems, okay? Because we're answering directly as selectmen to the people. And they'll complain to us and saying, hey, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, that's only a suggestion, that's going to come before the town meeting, and you got to, at that time, you got a right to vote. Well, we didn't know anything about this. How long has this been going on? I said, it's just the committees that's bringing in the suggestions. You're the final vote, It's a tough committee to be on, and and I know you guys had experience on that, and you know what I'm talking about, But I guess common sense prevails over everything. Sometimes I get to wonder where the hell the common sense is of these things.
Was this past committee all residents?
Yeah.
So
I don't remember any outsiders on that.
But the committee didn't
So-
bring any bylaws. We
So
didn't,
just-
we didn't propose any bylaws, we just reviewed bylaws.
Yeah.
okay.
People brought the bylaws to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen forwarded them to us for review. That's
Okay.
all it was. And then we made a recommendation back to the Board of Selectmen.
So this group had the opportunity when they got a bylaw about how high your lawn can be to say no. This is a silly
And all it
bylaw.
was a recommendation back to the Board of
Yeah, they
Selectmen.
provided a recommendation as this will be.
Right, so it seems like that this committee will have the power to look at a bylaw that's submitted and say, this is just silly, and vote on it. I mean, telling someone what windows they could have in their house seems a little bit invasive to me, but, so I don't know why we're even talking about this, to be honest with you.
So is there a motion to appoint someone, or?
Well, my only issue is we did have one other person apply, and it's not too often we get 4 people to volunteer. And there's no great rush.
How many openings do you have?
We have one. We have one opening.
So everybody on the committee is appointed, is they work for the town, or they are the chairman of a committee, and there's only one, like, outside.
There's two
outside view.
at large residents. We appointed one at the last meeting, because at that time we had only had one application in.
Did a lot of people know about it? I just heard about it 2 days ago. I mean, it just doesn't seem like, people really knew about it.
Was it posted on the town's
We have a
website?
list of other people who are just taxpayers in town who have interest in it. who would like to review the bylaws that are coming in. And these people pay taxes. And they're not controlled by anybody.
Well, I don't think they're gonna be, I don't think anyone's gonna be controlled by anybody.
I do.
I don't. I disagree with you.
All right, so, yes, there was a fourth person. My impression is he withdrew. I know he didn't say that.
Didn't
That's the
withdraw, he's
way.
already been on the committee. He told me he couldn't make it tonight, because I know it's Peter Marone. He was already on the committee years ago.
I mean, we have a decision to make. Do we want to table it? We had 3 people come in out of their way. I mean, I hate to have everyone come back.
Why don't you make the committee bigger? If you got 3 or 4 residents who want to sit on it, what's the difference if it's 5 or 9? Who cares? You got a few more people having input into it, reviewing it.
I mean, that's always an option, but is there,
I'll make a motion to postpone the decision until we can reach out to Peter Maroney, because it sounds like he's not saying he doesn't want to be part of it, he just couldn't make it. And I don't want to eliminate a resident having an opportunity to be on a board, because, I mean, I don't know why he couldn't make it. Could it have been a family emergency or something like that? So I'd like to postpone, that's my motion, to postpone the
She likes to
decision.
table a decision
Table.
for 2
And
weeks.
there's 2 other people who would like to be on it, Victor Palmieri, who ran for selectman, and Joe Palmer.
Eldon,
But they knew nothing
Second,
about
we'll
film
move
and
forward with it
application.
tonight, you know, and
Huh?
get it over with, you know, we've had this out for a while now, you know, maybe nobody knew about it, you know?
So now you got what, 4, 5,
Like I
6?
said, I know-
You got about 6 residents who want to be on it,
I do feel-
and you got room for 1.
hold on.
That's ridiculous.
No, I mean, I have no issue making a decision tonight. I mean, there is only 1 spot as of now. At any time, we can always increase the size if we choose. We can do that at any point.
Do it anytime, you know,
But I don't see,
take whoever we
we
got
can
now
always
and.
appoint someone now, and if we decide to grow it, increase the number of committee
Wanna
members, we
increase
can
the-
always
the
do
committee,
that
We can always do that
2
anytime.
weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whenever we choose.
You have our own committee. Yeah. Done.
So Denise did make a motion. It sounds like there is not a second to the motion. So are there any other motions? Okay,
I'll make a motion, Paul Bunker.
is there a second? I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Made a motion for
Okay.
what?
Paula has been appointed. We can always discuss this at any time. We can put it on the agenda another time if we do decide, or to talk about increasing the number of members if we'd like to do that. But for now, Paula, congratulations, I guess. And thank you all for coming in and applying. It's not often that we get more than 1 person, or that there's any competition or anything on these boards or committees. So we do appreciate everyone applying and coming in.
The, earlier on that hearing that you had, all the catch basins in our town are on the GIS map. And I was the one that mapped 80% of the drainage, and that's why it's there. And there's no reason why every new subdivision, when I left, all the elevations of every outfall and the inlets, the outfalls, they're all marked, and all the slopes of all the drains were all documented in the GIS. Well, now that I've been elected as a water commissioner, seems like that map has fallen way behind. The center of town has not been changed at all. The old center, if you look at the GIS, we spent $1 million keeping that up over the last 30 years. And you should be able to run the program that John's talking about off of an iPad because we use them in the water department for all the water, for the curb boxes, water gates, and everything that's on that map has a number. So John probably isn't aware that all that stuff is even there, but it's all there, and the town's already paid for it. We already had engineers engineer it into it. So, don't go spending thousands and thousands of taxpayers' dollars when you've already paid for it once.
Rick, is that something maybe you can talk with him about? Because this MS4, is that what it's called? It sounds like a huge project.
It's been going on for 20 years.
Yeah, but
Okay?
now that it looks
And
like
that's
it's-
why it became part of the water department, because the highway department wasn't doing it. And that's why we got involved and we started mapping all the drainage pipes, the size, the material. We had to get slopes, where the outfalls went, because it affected the quality of the water in town. And that's why we were getting involved in it. I had mapped about 80% of the town, and there isn't much left. There's a little. I retired before I could finish it.
Well, you're
okay?
back.
But John probably doesn't have a map. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you can talk to him and.
Wayne told me that the center of town isn't even on there. I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
And that map, we spent $1 million on it. We got probably one of the best GIS systems of all the towns around. You ask engineers who've seen it, and it's just being wasted away. And I think you're paying somebody to keep the map up, and he's not doing it. So you need to look into that.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, going back up to approve campaign and observing at the polling location policy. Did everyone have a chance to read that over the past couple weeks? And are there any comments, or are we good? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the campaigning and observing at the polling location policy.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next we have the alcohol policy. I know there's been a couple changes since we first got the copy 2 weeks ago. Tracy spent a lot of time on this. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
I'll
entertain later.
Yep. Eldon, Denise, did you have anything first?
No, I think, and the police have gone over this. What was it here?
Yeah, Chris and Vic have seen it and provided
They're all right with
feedback
it?
to Tracy. Yep. Right?
Yes.
Denise, did you have anything first?
I also went through it fairly thoroughly and sent in my thoughts to Tracy. And I reviewed it, and it looks like most of what I suggested was put in there. That's about all I have on it.
Okay. Mr. Dupree.
Just going back, the last major change was back in 2012, and if I remember correctly, license holders were actually notified. There was a public hearing on the major overhaul to the policy. Why wasn't that procedure done this time?
I don't think any of us were here in 2000. Well, Eldon was. But I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I don't think that there's any reason why we would have to notify them. I mean, we have to give them the new copy once we adopt it, obviously, but I don't think they don't have the right, I think, to give us input. I don't think we have to go seek input from them.
I know you're not required, but in the matter of transparency, because you're so altering this into, and I'm going to address some of the points later on as to the non-egregious and egregious incidents. I think you would want that kind of open dialogue and discussion, because I mean you're setting forth these penalties and actually increasing the penalties to these license holders, and they have an interest in these licenses. So to just say that, I don't think we need to get their input isn't necessarily, in my opinion, the most open and transparent way to go about making revisions to a very impactful and possibly, business closing policy.
well, back in those days, we didn't have an agent in the first place, you know, to, that's out there and, you know, doing this all the time, you know. And that time, maybe we opened it up. So I don't know why we didn't do it this time, but we didn't, you know.
Well, I mean, you can certainly do it now. I mean, I don't see the rush to approve this policy. I mean, you can send the change. It seems like you've reached a certain consensus. Send it to them, have another meeting, ask for input. If they don't show up, well, that's their loss. But give them at least a chance. Let them know, because I mean, to put out just in the October 3rd meeting, it was the notice was alcohol policy proposed amendments. There was no discussion at that time. You just accepted the documents and then moved forward to this one, and now you're just ready to approve them without holding a discussion at all. You've reviewed them individually, and you're what it seems like getting ready to just vote on it without any discussion as to why some of these changes are being made, why they need to be rushed at this time, why it has to happen in this manner without seeking input from people whose livelihoods can depend on this. And I'll address later on, after getting an answer on that question, some of the holes that I see in terms of due process and actually contradictory materials as to the responsibilities of the board versus the actions of the liquor license agent. So my first question as to, will you consider postponing the vote and getting additional input from license holders?
My personal opinion is I would think that the license holders would obviously want us to be as absolutely lenient as possible. I mean, if they have concerns once we send this out, I'm glad to listen to them. I mean, obviously it will be adopted at that time, but if there is a gap that we find from a number of local businesses, then I'm fine with addressing that. But I don't see as much value in seeking them out to come sit with us here to go through every change that they'd like to see. I mean, I think that they're a little bit biased naturally. I'm not saying that.
Well, they have a property interest in these licenses, and to alter this policy in this manner and fashion by taking them in, not having them published or notified that they would be policy changes made.
Sure, so can I, Mr. Chairman, if you...
Go ahead.
Okay with me,
Yep. Go ahead, Tracy.
So part of why, I don't think it was done to rush. Part of why this timing is important is because we're in the process of the annual renewals now. So the renewal packets will be going out to all the licensees, and we see an opportunity to include this so that they're in the best position to be made aware. And I also think that a lot of the changes that we painstakingly made were intended to clarify the process in the event that there were potential incidents, and allow for some level of interaction with the liquor agent before they would be called in to be in a public hearing to address certain issues that maybe didn't rise to the same level as you mentioned, the egregious and the non-egregious. So kind of making that a little bit more explicit as well.
So if I could answer a question too, John. I spent about 3 hours going through this, and I'm not a lawyer, but I sent in a very redlined version, made multiple changes, sought clarification on certain areas of it, and it appeared to me to be a good attempt to have a step process at violations versus there being a catch-all category where there's no necessarily a defined difference between I don't have up this is the third time you've not seen my liquor license on the wall versus I just served a minor. So this seemed to at least have a documentation to show the steps.
And if I may, it's a good attempt. However, I mean, let's begin with the section of license noncompliance. It talks about establishing a hearing process, and then it doesn't actually outline a hearing process. The only portion of that is notice. So there's no indication of how the hearing is to proceed, who will be presenting charges against them, how many days prior will be the notice given, 10, 14,
What page
30?
If I might add, though, that wasn't in there before, so we didn't edit that down. That just
Oh, I
didn't
understand, I
exist.
had problems with it back then.
Right, but I'm
I mean,
just
these are
saying,
due
so
process
that-
concerns that need to, that I think if you're looking to do a comprehensive policy and avoid the wiggle that is in this policy now, you need to make changes like that and say, notice will be given 10 days prior to the hearing. You are allowed to have the benefit of counsel at the hearing. The hearing will proceed in such a manner, you know, if the liquor licensing agent will present the alleged violation, you will have a chance to respond. I mean, just that detailed type of information. Because right now, you actually struck out, hearings shall be conducted in accordance with procedures described in this policy. But you actually took that language
Right,
out.
and for the exact reason that you just described. So the statutory requirement is reasonable notice and opportunity to be heard. We're following that. We took out that line specifically because we didn't really go into a hearing process. The hearing will unfold, but they're advised when it is, what the allegation is, and they're presented the opportunity to participate in that hearing.
Well, the general information says the hearing process. So you identify that there will be a hearing process, and then you don't identify one.
So, I mean, you could strike the hearing process from that title. The crux of it is they're entitled to a hearing, we've addressed that.
It's not in that title, it's in the general information section. I mean, that this policy covers a hearing process, and then you don't identify a hearing process.
So fair on that point, it could say hearing, not process, which is why it was struck further down. So I think that the spirit of what you're saying in that particular instance, I can see that coming out, but,
Yeah.
On what
Yeah,
page?
there it is in the paragraph. This policy summarizes, no, go back. This policy summarizes the license application process, license non-compliance, and hearing process.
so it could say in hearing. I mean, the process, it was struck further on for that very reason. It doesn't get into the details because we don't have to be more descriptive than that. They're just entitled to.
But I think you would like to be in order to make sure that all due process is protected.
But the board is not required to be more restrictive than the statute. So that's,
I'm just presenting my concerns and opinion.
Okay.
Do-
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think it's.
And that's just the
I
first
think
one.
it's. I think that wording is fairly minor. I mean, the hearing process, as Tracy said, is statutory. I mean, we do it. We're reasonable. I mean, yeah, that could change if there's a different board, if someone decides not to be reasonable. But I think you've seen us be pretty reasonable in the past few weeks when people have asked for continuances. Okay, so moving on. Did you have something else?
Moving into the how is this non-egregious and egregious section developed?
So you're right.
Who
We should have
proposed it?
explained this better than just moving right along. But so Tracy, I met with Tracy, the police chief, and the liquor license agent, Sergeant Warner, and part of what we talked about was that there's a lot of minor violations that come about that we don't. Essentially, we ignored our policy and didn't do anything. And if you looked at our previous policy, or current policy, I guess, you see there's not much room for establishing how severe the violations are. Not posting a no shirt, no shoes, no service sign, or a dress code sign, or whatever is required, would be the same as serving a minor or having a brawl in the establishment. And we weren't enforcing it properly. We were essentially ignoring it. And
Well, that would be on the liquor licensing agent, wouldn't it?
no, not necessarily. Because some of that stuff has come to us and we haven't acted on it. So we weren't enforcing our own policy. So we tried to develop something that was more enforceable. And the non-egregious and egregious we came up with because there's clearly some things that are more severe. And those in the egregious list are what we came up with as being the more severe, that there would be an immediate penalty or after a hearing or whatever the process may be. We decided those would have a harsher penalty. And then anything else is most likely less severe, for instance, not posting a sign. But the liquor license agent and us had an issue with year after year when he would do the annual inspections. Some of these places weren't complying. After he asked them to, it would be the exact same thing year over year. And we essentially weren't doing anything about it because they appeared to be minor. But if it just continues year after year, at some point it's not minor anymore. They're just completely ignoring our policy, potentially state law, and the liquor license agent's request. So that's why we established those two categories, so that we could better enforce our own policy.
Okay. Taking the first category, non-egregious, which I would just refer to as minor non-compliance violations, you don't actually identify which policy they're in non-compliance of within that section.
Anything. Any statutory or
But
any violation.
of what? It's vague and ambiguous. I mean, in terms of enforcement, you've got to identify which policies they have to adhere to. You can't just say any. I mean, is it violation of this policy? Is it violation of state law? Is it violation of ABCC policies? I mean, it has to be clear.
So, and I think it's addressed on page 1, general information, when it discusses the issuance of liquor licenses and what they're subject to. So that would be this policy, the ABCC regulations, as well as the Mass General Law and CMR that are cited. So it's really any of those. So if the liquor agent or the LLA.
Then in this particular policy section, you would need to state that. While it does identify that in the general area, it doesn't identify the non-compliance. And going further on, in your first non-egregious incident section, the liquor license agent will issue a letter to the licensee advising of what he or she considers a potential violation, and that the licensee must remedy the non-compliance. So they're the investigator, they're the prosecutor, and they're the judge. And then it goes on to say each individual member of the LLA will receive a copy of this letter and the applicable police report. What it doesn't say is what happens if they don't. You see, there's no, it goes on by saying they must remedy the non-compliance immediately if possible, but in any event within 30 days. What happens if they don't?
So it does go on to say if they don't address it, it would be a second, if it's a minor incident, it would fall into the bucket of accumulating incidents. And at no time is a violation issued against a licensee without a vote of the board. So.
But it doesn't say that.
It does.
No, can you please point it out to me?
When it goes through the progressive steps, there'll be a hearing. It's done at the hearing.
But you don't even get to a hearing. You don't even get to a hearing.
You do. If you look at, for example, look at page 3, section 2C, the last few lines.
Right, but what I'm saying is the LLA never receives an opportunity to determine an actual non-compliance.
That's where I'm citing. That is where that happens.
In the first non-egregious incident.
If it's an egregious incident, it automatically goes before the LLA. If it's a non-egregious incident, at the point when the LLA is going to make a decision as to whether or not it constituted a violation, it is done at a hearing.
Okay, well, that role is actually not elaborated under the duties of the liquor license agent. If you go,
what was that?
The duty you just described. There are conflicts and gaps here that are inconsistent. Has this been reviewed by town council?
No.
This is as a part of the process, that is the last step. So once the board has had the opportunity to be okay with that as to form, obviously we're not going to have them weighing in all along the way, but yes, they'll see the final vote.
So you are intending to vote on this tonight and then send it over to town council?
It'll be subject to town council.
Prior to review?
Subject to town council's approval. We'd be voting on it subject to town council's approval.
I just think you are opening a door to issues.
Would we-
Let's go down to the egregious incidents issue, all right?
Before we go there, can I just ask a quick question, John?
Go ahead.
So, just so I understand you correctly, I think on the fact where you're saying the policy is not described, that could be remedied quickly on page 1 after town alcohol policy, rules and regulations, etc., is quoted in the first paragraph, just putting after it, parenthesis, quote, the policy. So that wherever it's mentioned further on, it does go back to the statutory and town policies. Is that a quick remedy of that?
I think it would address some concern, but I don't know if it would address all.
Okay, and secondly, on page 3, it sounds like what you're alluding to is what's not clear is that if you don't comply with the requirements of the first non-egregious incident, it's really not understood. Now it falls into the second category.
That language is
second, yes?
Not there.
Not there,
It-
okay.
In fact,
I'm just
you're-
trying to follow.
there's that, and then the fact that the liquor licensing agent is ascribed a duty to perform in the non-egregious incident section, but then is not fully elaborated or particularized in their duties further on.
Okay.
Also that, they are determining a non-compliance and actually reaching a determination of a violation which would precipitate a second non-egregious violation, and they can do that without ever having the board weigh in on it. And I don't think that's something that you want to allow to happen. I mean, if there is a non-egregious incident, the first one, the letter should go, and then it should come before the board. I mean, that's it. If you want to enforce the policies, don't give the liquor licensing agency wiggle room to determine whether or not they complied or didn't comply. The only one who should be determining that violation happened or didn't happen is the LLA, the Liquor Licensing Authority, not the agent. The agent is an investigator, and it presents information to the board. The only determination of a violation of non-compliance should come from the board. And I think that's a major change that has to happen in the policy as it's set forth now. I mean, if I can go down further to the egregious incident section, egregious incidents shall include, and that means only the enumerated, in statutory language, shall include, and that's only the ones identified. What about if a employee is engaging in, the manager is engaging in criminal activity? That's not listed here as an egregious activity. There's knowingly allowing intoxicated patrons into licensed premises. There are circumstances and conditions which they see a drunk person get out of their car, come into the building, they know they're drunk, they let them sit down, they call the police. But now, because there's no room to maneuver here, they're now on the hook for violating the policy, whereas they just precipitated and aided the police in keeping a drunk driver off the street. So I think I see the worth in doing this, but I don't see that it has gone far enough and clear enough to allow license holders to have the ability to know what it is that they need to be required to do, who will be determining whether a violation has occurred, because right now, violations can be determined by the liquor licensing agent through a letter alone. And it would never come to the board until later on. I think you're premature in bringing this to a vote without further study and without further input from town council and from license holders.
Well, for years, I've gone to court there, we revoked license and we didn't have any problem. We just followed chapter 138 of the things there. Now we're making rules of our own here. Maybe we should go back to the old way of doing things. We had less problems. And this, like you say, it probably is opening up a can of worms.
Yeah. Because
just go back to the chapter and, it's gone through, they've revoked licenses and it's held,
Well,
I understand what you're saying, Alden, but it was an attempt to try to be as fair as we
Well, we're
possibly
not trying to
could.
streamline it, but then again, Now there's a hell of a lot of questions, because we didn't have the agent in those days to contend with and all that stuff, but.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I disagree. We should just go back to the old way because, for a lot of reasons. But anyway, I think your
Well,
points.
We're gonna have rules and regulations, and we're
I
gonna
think-
get
I
hammered
think-
on them.
I think John's points are well taken. I mean, you're a lawyer. I can't compete with you. But, you know, a good effort was put forth in trying to
Absolutely.
develop this.
I think John,
so
I'm not
I-
questioning that.
No, no.
I wouldn't, I think it's worth the time to maybe take a little more time with this, put a little more thought into it, get town council involved, maybe look at if there's an opportunity to look at any other alcohol policies that might already be in there. But it sounds like we have a time constraint because we wanted to get it out.
Oh, because the renewals are coming up.
If the board's wish is that we investigate this further, I will say I appreciate all of the commentary. I don't agree with all of it, but if the board wishes to take more time, I'm fine with that. It was an opportunity to make sure that the licensees got it as part of their renewal packet because they're all getting a communication and expecting it and being able to sign off that they received it and return that to us. We can do that at a later date if that's the wishes.
When does that go out, Tracy?
It's going out next week.
Next week.
I like some of these.
Okay. I mean, there were some good points made. I don't, as Tracy said, I'm with Tracy. I don't agree with all of it. I don't think that we've made the agent judge and
Jury.
whatever the expression was used. I don't think he's the judge on this. I mean, there's no penalty being implemented. We were trying to streamline the process because right now, I don't think it makes sense for if someone doesn't have a small sign up, something minor, that they have to come sit before us in one of these meetings, the first time at least. So it is the third time that they'd come in, I believe,
Correct.
on this policy. And at that point, we would go back and review the first two and be assured that those were true violations before implementing any penalty.
But the policy doesn't state that. The policy is unclear as to that course of action.
And that's where I think we differ in opinion. I think it's clear. We have a difference of opinion.
Yeah, no, I know. I don't see that language.
And Tracy, I thought we had language in here that allowed us to consider any violation egregious if we deemed it to be. Is that
I think
accurate?
there's some language saying that you can, I'm trying to remember exactly where it
So,
is. but
so these
basically
aren't the only 8 or however many. We do have the option of considering any violation egregious.
I'd have to review.
Because
I know we
obviously,
talk
there's
about-
obviously some we missed. I mean,
And if there is an
But that
we could
intention,
go all day
Again, that's not
long.
how it's written.
We could make pages of them.
Yeah, but exactly, which is why you don't identify specific
Yep.
non-compliance.
No, I get it. I mean,
Because
these are the
you're
most.
boxing yourself in.
These
It's
are the
not-
most likely, so that we went with what Chris and what we thought of.
and I'm sorry, Chairman.
So-
I
That's
think
okay,
that
go
the
ahead.
intention was to, and there could be a little bit of tweaking on the language in terms of it including other things, but I think the idea was there are certain things that automatically are severe and rise to the level of needing to come before the LLA. These are clearly them. These, everybody agrees that these are severe enough that they should be in here. So that was the spirit.
Right, and one of the ways I would suggest in doing that is matching the language of the ABCC for the violations that have occurred. Not coming up with, over-serving. There's a definition for what that is. There's, if you want to go back and provide examples, egregious incidents shall include, but not be limited to, the following. And you give several examples, serving to minors. And here's the other one, just going into licensee participating in criminal activities. Here's where I see a problem with that. How are you proving that? What criminal activities are we talking about? Convicted? Charged? Indicted? I mean, it's way too, yes, criminal activity is criminal activity, but in a policy where penalties will be flowing, you need to clearly identify and substantiate what it is that they will be faced with. I mean, and I just think, and somewhat to Eldon's point, less is more. I mean, you can be concise in setting up major non-compliance, minor non-compliance, have a procedure where the LLA, could issue a letter and then, state that failure to, correct or comply is a violation, which gives you to the next step. And I don't think that process is clearly identified here. And I just, again, because of the way this has an impact on all the license holders, to put up a substantial amount of money to run businesses in this town. I think, one, you might want to talk to them before you just do this, and two, it needs a little more time. I think the effort is great, but it hasn't crossed over the finish line yet.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. So is there a motion either to move forward with this or to table it for 2 weeks from now and go through it again, or I'll entertain a motion?
David, what do you think?
Well, the only thing I'd like to caution the board on is this, is that if we go back to the non-egregious incidences, when we look at A and B, I'm going to echo what was said earlier. This was an opportunity to allow the person that's in the field to have a little bit more teeth than he currently has. There is no harm done from the standpoint that he cannot or she could not close the facility, charge a fine, whatever the case might be. That can only be done once it gets to the third egregious incident, or non-egregious incident, and only the board can make that decision. And the board always, as a licensing authority, can always amend anything it wants at any time, meaning that if if the licensee is in front of you and you say we disagree with our license agent, the previous two were not violations, and therefore we have wiped them out or expunged them. You always have that flexibility to do so. This was an opportunity to allow the person in the field a little bit more flexibility so he would be taken more seriously, because as of right now, he feels that he is not. And so my point of this is as follows. This is a policy issue, not a legal issue. You have to make a decision as to how much empowerment, if you want to classify it as such, that you would like your person in the field to have. On the second page, which is in reference to egregious incidences, that is where I would have a little bit more concern, and I would want to make sure that town council weighed in on that, because that would have more legal implications than just policy implications. So if you're going to take a vote that you're going to table this, I would also ask the board to direct us as to exactly what we should be studying and looking at in the meantime.
If I may just follow up quickly on if the impetus is to give the LLA, the liquor license agent, but they're the same acronym, more autonomy in his actions and more authority. I think that also needs to be included within the duty section. I mean, I think if you want to, you had A and B, which are the first and second, which, the LLA, the liquor licensing agent, is actually making a determination of a violation. He's reaching that conclusion. And yes, the board can go back and wipe that out. But again, that's not included in here. They end up getting a non-compliance mark against them just by the liquor licensing agent. They can get a second non-compliance mark against them. And there should also be a policy in here where if you are talking about a non-egregious violation, where the liquor license holder can actually come before the board and challenge it. That's not in the policy either. I mean, again, there are just, I think, some more steps that need to be taken and put in here. And again, the liquor license holders themselves just might have, they may look at this and go, yep, absolutely, love that, love that, love that, love that, tweak this, boom, done. But give them a chance. Because they bring in revenue to this town. And we do want to make sure it's safe. And we do want to make sure that they hold up to the policy that we established. But a policy that is clear, concise, consistent, and fair. done.
Okay. So is there a motion? Do we want to provide
Provide
Tracy with
information to
some
the
direction?
attorney.
So we need to give
It's
Tracy
okay.
direction on what we want to amend if we're gonna table it. Amend or look into.
So I would make a motion to table it, and I would recommend the following amendments, and that's on page 1, in the sentence that starts in the first paragraph. Is this the degree you want us to go? Okay. To the sentence that starts with the issuance of the liquor license, et cetera, after it quotes the town policy and statutory, at the end of where CMR is, put in parenthesis, quote, the policy, end parenthesis. On page 3, where it talks about the non-egregious incidents, try to put in something that explains it's a step, and that the licensee always has the opportunity to contest the liquor agent's decision. On page
Well, I think just section C in general. I
Okay.
mean, if you want to just say section C needs to be examined and
And on the egregious incidents, page 4, where it says egregious incidents it should put egregious incidents include but are not limited to, and somehow note it that these types of violations are subject to the policy, so that when we get into something of licensee participating in criminal activities, I think having it go back to the fact that it relates to the statute might be sufficient. I mean, this is still going to go to town council, but that's all I have.
Okay. Is there a second?
Does Eldon have anything to add? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to-
No, I think you've covered it, but like I said, I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So I think,
We put it on
to
the
summarize,
agenda
all
to
of
wait.
us were in favor of the gist of the policy, but correct, so, okay.
I think the spirit, and understanding that some of it's not necessarily defined, John, the spirit of the policy was to actually not have license holders in here because of something small.
and understood, and if I may, the motion that was just forwarded was much more restrictive than I think what was being discussed prior. I think we may have just missed the forest for the trees. I mean, I think it was to get town council to look at this
Yeah.
holistically.
So any additions or changes
Yeah.
from town council?
Yeah, but I think we have, I think I have the direction that we're
Right,
looking
and then
at.
Yeah.
for clarification, before we were going to vote on it and then send it to town council, for the sake of clarification, what we're saying, we're tabling it, we're making recommendations, it's going to go to town council, and then it will come back for a vote. So we're really not making it more restrictive?
But no, what I'm saying
Oh,
is
yeah,
the
I-
motion itself was very restrictive and it.
It's, yeah, so
It-
it'll
it
be
needs to have
reviewed
a broader-
it'll be reviewed by town
Yeah.
council, and we'll see the changes.
And then I'll make every
At a
attempt to have,
holistic level, not just at a
yeah,
specific.
and then I'll make every attempt to have it back at the next meeting, but obviously we're also subject to town council's review period, so
Right.
if it's not, the next one will be the one after that.
When do they get their signed licenses, Tracy? So would it be then, now that you'd ask them to sign off?
Whenever it's we'll just have to do a separate mailing
Okay.
and have them send it back to us. So it'll just have to be done when it's ready.
Okay. Approve the
Thank you
meeting
for all your
minutes
efforts,
of
Tracy.
September 19th, 2018.
Make a motion.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Except for review minutes of October 3rd.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Appoint election workers. David, is that listed here?
It is, so-
I haven't seen that yet.
So it looks like it's at page 44. There's two people per statute. Only the Board of Selectmen can make the appointment, but the town clerk will do it every time that there's an election cycle. She will make a recommendation. There are two people before you for her recommendation.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
National Grid, amendment to conformity and grant of easement agreement.
Yep, so before you is an easement, amendment to an easement agreement. Apparently in 2011, this board signed a confirmatory easement amendment at that point because we took the land in 2007 and that there was some type of an error that the easement was actually never recorded from National Grid. National Grid came back before you in 2011. Under Town Council's review, you then signed the grant easement agreement at that point. And then there was a second error from National Grid because they did not include all the appropriate meets and bounds that had already been included in the original easement instrument. So now they had to do an additional amendment to it. Town Council has reviewed it. I've pulled out the original paperwork from when everything was approved in 2007 to make sure that the easement was accepted. So at this point, it's really just a vote of the board, and it only requires the signature of the chair.
Question from the floor, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Was this easement ever voted at town meeting?
It was.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, David. Did you say you're asking for a motion or just my signature?
No, just a motion to approve and then a signature by the chair, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Cemetery restoration contract, David?
Yep, so a couple of years ago at town meeting approved CPC funds to be used for a cemetery restoration project. This is phase one of it. Before we went out to bid, we followed the procurement laws. We received 3 bids in. The lowest bid for what we could afford to do is before you for Colonial Stone in the amount of $63,300. The amount of work that will be performed is that we'll be performing work on South Street at the Ames Cemetery that will complete all the work that is required, and then we will begin work on the old cemetery, which is apparently the one at South Street and Cross Street. Once those funds have been exhausted, we will have to go back to town meeting. There's some other cemetery work that has to be done and some other ones. But again, this is phase one. And because they're the lowest bid and they're the most responsive bidder, I'm looking for a motion to award the bid to Colonial Stone.
Is there a motion?
Could I ask a question? You said the bid was 63.3, but the illustration on page 2 at the bottom has a price of 98.6.
Yep. So as I said, 63,000 is only the amount that we can afford. So what we did is that during typical bidding is that you'll put in bid specs and you'll let them know that there's alternates. So we bid, here's your base bid, and then tell us what the others cost. Because of course, we don't know what the bid is going to be. So we're not going to be able to do the following project, all those projects. We're only going to be able to do $63,300 worth of those projects.
So really only 51 though, right? Because we won't be able to do
No,
either
because some of,
two.
yeah.
Or are there parts of the other two?
Exactly, because what you'll see there is that gives you per grave site or per.
Okay.
And
For
so
the-
if they were to do all of them, it totals up to what it is, but we can't.
Okay.
And so, again, some of them require a little bit more work than others, so we have to make some decisions on the fly. But based on our appropriation, we can only spend $63,300, and based on the metrics provided by all three, Colonial Stone was the least expensive one.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the contract?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
To award the contract.
Sorry, motion to
Award the contract.
award the contract. Thank you.
Eldon has a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and discussion on salary ranges. Denise, you had asked for this to be on the agenda.
Yeah, this was something I asked about and has been on my mind. I think we need to try to implement or at least start a study of salary ranges. David and I have had some conversations on this, and in my view, the reasons we need to do this is so that we ensure we have a fair and reasonable approach for compensation by comparing like towns. Consider a associate or a new hire's experience when they apply for a position, their education, performance if it's an existing employee. It'll also provide some transparency to the taxpayers and the employees if there are ranges to jobs, and it's not just a matter of every year it's a 2.5% increase, or when it appears that they're the highest paid, and I'll just use the janitor in versus pinning a particular title in the state of Massachusetts, just happens to work in Massachusetts. That's typically not the case, but there's not always consistency with how we're comparing salaries. Is a like town Easton? Well, not necessarily. Is a like town Middleborough? Well, not by population, but there are still some basic tasks any employee needs to perform. And it'll also provide better forecasting for budgets if we have a range for these salaries. So that's what I'm proposing. Now, David and I have talked about this. There are potential ways to start this process without it being labor intensive, and that's having department heads or whomever it may be that's not in a union, when they do come in with a request for a salary increase, bring us the comparable towns' salaries. This is public record or available to them. Yeah, it may take a couple phone calls, but check around. Don't not just come in and say, well, in this town, the janitor is paid $100,000 a year. I deserve to be paid $100,000 a year. Well, there may be two other towns where that janitor is paid $80,000 and another town where he's paid $140,000. And that's where the other considerations come into play. But now at least we have a range to work with versus it, and I'm not saying it is, but it appears to be a lot of guesswork.
So we actually do exactly that. When there's a negotiation, we don't do it annually, or we only do it when there's a negotiation, when either we hire someone new or someone comes to us asking for an increase. David does put it together, I believe, not the employee. It's typically roughly 10 towns that he views as comparable. And we do, since I've been here, I've had that every time in front of me. I don't know if that's new, if David implemented that, or if it was done previously, but we have been doing exactly that for at least the ones
Yeah,
that I've been through.
I've never seen it.
Because we haven't, there's been no negotiation since you've been on, that's why.
Okay,
So he doesn't do it when there's no negotiations on an annual basis, just when there is someone asking for an increase or we hire someone new.
So if I can, maybe if I could get a copy of the past template, so at least I start to develop an understanding
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
this.
Because the contracts are all done for this year. Next year, we're talking down the line.
Right.
Yeah, that has been done, comparatively, but also we hire at a low rate, and so what we did, David, and we look at them, and so we don't go strictly to what somebody else does, or some other town does. We use common sense, and we've saved the taxpayer money over the years, but then again, I don't really know if we should be going that way, because then we go up at the town meeting, and it's hard to, even after the person has proven himself, then we look at the scale, and we see where he is, and on that last town meeting, he was way low than for that similar job. We compared towns like Avon, but the towns are got to be sort of comparable in population of what they can afford. Some towns can afford a hell of a lot more than
Right.
other towns. That's wherever. Now I know where you come from, but I think this will be addressed at the time, and like I said, a lot of the things that you want, you probably don't have a copy of them, but we have been doing.
Okay. So I think having the templates and getting myself up to speed on it, what the process is, and looking at the different towns. I know, like, you even have to take into consideration such things as, for example, looking at a water department. I I think someone threw out at one point that evaluate the prices of water in Westport. They pay so much money. Well, Westport's mostly wells.
Yeah,
So you have very few
Yeah,
people.
no, there's a lot of
on
factors.
So there's so many
Population
things, yeah.
is not the only thing, or size is not the
Right.
only thing. I mean, in many DPWs do different things in different towns. Some towns outsource their landscaping. Some do more than we do. Another consideration, especially for the police department, is location as to where we are. We have a major city next to us. You look at a town the size of us, similar budget, out in western Mass or middle of nowhere, they don't deal with the same things. Our police department's actually much bigger than most towns our size. You'll find Halifax is a similar size, I think, and our police department is at least double the size.
But we also have the proximity
We
to
have
24.
proximity, and we have major highways running through the town. So there's a lot of other things that need to be considered, and not just similar size towns.
And that was one. There was a book we received that was really helpful for even if you were comparing a DPW salary. It gave you the miles of paved roadway.
Yep.
So when you're looking at plowing, you can take that into consideration.
Yeah, so what I'll do is, as you know, we are in the middle of all of our contracts. It's going to be another 2 years before most of our department head contracts come up. As the board knows, I provide the board with salary comparisons of comparable towns at that point, and what I'll do is I'll provide that list and information over to Denise.
And
Thank
like
you.
I said, if I look at the old ones, David, then I can start educating myself. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, public comment period. Anything else? That's what I like to hear. All right, David has a quick town administrator's report.
So just an update. We have received notice back from town council that the Supreme Judicial Court has not taken our appeal in reference to an open meeting law violation that had been filed. So as a result, the appeals court stands. And although there is a opinion of town council that we could continue some type of action, I don't see that the board's going to have any desire to do so, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it at this point. So it is what it is. The appeals decision stands. The next one is in reference to the Peterson Puritan Incorporation federal court case that we have that they have charged against us in reference to an EPA. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me. I think this is the matter that I will recuse myself from.
Yep. We could do that now if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. So, Selectman Reyes has recused herself in this case from the very beginning. So if
I'll
you-
do the whole formal part and
No
sit in
worries.
the audience too.
So to the board, bottom line is that we have entered into a settlement. The settlement has to be entered into court. Our town council, although he's licensed at the state level in Rhode Island, is not licensed at the federal level. And as a result, he is looking to be appointed for the day from a judge or a clerk. He's trying to determine the process in Rhode Island. And if the process is going to take too long, he's going to reach out to a friend of his or an attorney in the state of Rhode Island that can do it on our behalf. He said it would be about 1 hour's worth of work and it would be billed out at the hourly rate that he bills out. So since we don't know how it will play out, it's going to take another week or two. He says that we just need to get authorization from the board to allow him to appoint special counsel on behalf of the board for that one particular incident if needed and required.
Okay, so is there a motion to allow for that?
Yes.
And I will second that.
motion.
All in favor? Aye. 2 yes, 1
Question
recusal.
on that. Is the special counsel looking to be admitted before the federal court?
The special counsel would already be admitted in federal court.
No, I mean, you just said he's looking to,
So town council is looking to be admitted for the day to appear on behalf of the town. If that process is going to take too long, because we want to get this done the next couple of weeks, if that process is going to take too long, then he is going to ask an additional, a different attorney to represent our interests.
okay, well, I'll tell you, it's gonna take too long.
Well,
Because I'm licensed both in the state and admitted to practice federal in Rhode Island, and
So if that's the case, then he believes he has a firm in mind. He's not sure exactly who the individual would be, but he'll go down that road.
Okay, thank you.
Was there a vote on that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're all
Okay,
set.
okay, good.
Joining
I
the
asked after
meeting.
the vote.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Boston Post cane replication. Eldon, if you would like to speak to this one, we've placed some pictures and we've done some homework and research for you. As you know, we have not had a replicated version to be able to pass out in the past. We're looking to do so. We've done some homework. It looks like another town uses an organization out of New Hampshire. It would cost us roughly around $200 for each one. Looks like they do a pretty good job. Part of putting it out here is because we do have a lot of talent in this town. And if somebody is watching this and they said, hey, I'm a good handyman, I'm a good carpenter, I'd be willing to donate my time, and so the town doesn't have to spend $200, I'll just charge materials and say it's $100, that'd be fantastic. But if nobody does come forward, then again, I want to make sure that the board is in agreement, and then I would contract with this vendor, and we'd probably order a couple of them so we have them for whenever we have them in the future. And if the board is so inclined, I'd like to be able to give it to our existing recipient as well.
Well, the only thing is, I just think it's kind of cold there when they come in, we don't have nothing to give them. And I figure that, you know, maybe we can have them made up and they can keep. I know we lost the original and then we had to make shifts and then we asked them to bring it back. It's kind of to give something to somebody and ask them to bring it back. So I figured that at least the town probably can, you know, afford to give this thing out to them and let the family keepsake. I don't really know. Like, it sounds like a lot of money to do that, but like David said, there might be somebody that will reach out and would want to do this, you know?
And we're probably talking a couple $100 a year, right? Because since I've been on the board for a little over 2 years, we've only given out, I can recall maybe 2 or 3.
Right.
So we're looking at 1.5 a year or so.
Correct. It's correct. I mean, obviously, it is variable, but you're absolutely correct. We could go 6 years and not give one out. Unfortunately, sometimes we can go shorter. But you know, my thinking is that we have, if we were to order a couple now, 2 or 3 of them, we could give one to the current recipient. We'd have a couple here, and then we'll see how long it takes before we have to order another one. But I just want to make sure that it's the spirit of the board before I go ahead and order these.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion to go ahead and order the replica canes.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And the last one is just an update. A handful of months ago, we had a conversation at the board level in reference to potential digital storage. I've met with department heads. I've spoken to department heads. Right now, this is not something that they're looking to go forward on. We had also talked about looking to try to have old-fashioned storage by spending some money and making some retrofits to our building. Right now, there just doesn't seem to be an appetite to do that and going forward. So I've had a conversation, and the last thing is that one of our department heads has been using or had used in the past a digital storage company, and she found it to be expensive. The pricing looks cheap until you actually start to use it, store it, and then need to access those documents. So based on all that feedback, I think this is something that we may have to look at again in the future, but I just want to let you know the board at this point, there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for it, and so I don't want to say we'll table it, but right now it's not a priority.
I think, David, I agree with you. There's not a lot of enthusiasm about it, but maybe as we go forward and I start running out of room and there's nowhere to put it, it's certainly better than a $50,000 renovation to the attic to store paper. But maybe I think one of the expenses when you use an offsite storage is to bring those boxes back and forth. That's where the majority of your expenses. The fee to store it remotely it's small dollars, very small dollars. But if you start saying bring the boxes back and forth, that's when you run into a heightened transportation fee. But maybe that's something we can look at in the future too in using a shared service, whether it's with preparing the documents to be electronically stored or whatever. What was interesting is that East Bridgewater and Hanson just joined together into a shared service agreement for their IT employee. So, the idea of a shared service for small communities is growing because your budgets are stretched. So maybe as we get further down the line and start thinking about off-site storage and or scanning our documents and taking advantage of that, rather than looking at, okay, our staff doing it, if it needs to be, a half a person for a couple months to get everything onto the electronic record, maybe there is an opportunity for a shared service with another town.
Or getting rid of what we don't need.
We are?
No, or getting rid of what, we need to make sure that everything we are storing is
It's
necessary.
Right.
Which it very well could be, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Got two phones going, one of them on the Red Sox game?
No.